Hi, I'm Mimika Cooney and welcome to Mimika TV, the place to build a brilliant business. Today, we're talking about how to master your influence and impact. Jason Van Orden is passionate about teaching the science, psychology, and systems used by master influencers to maximize their impact on the internet. He's the author of Promoting Your Podcast, in which he was first to crack the code for topping the iTunes charts. In 2005, he co-founded Internet Business Mastery, the longest-running podcast for online entrepreneurs. He could talk about a lot of things about influence and impact, and we are going to dig right into his research that he's been doing lately in helping you build impact and make a bigger influence in the people that you serve. So welcome, Jason. Welcome to Mimika TV. So excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Looks like I'm getting ready to fly a jumbo jet or something.
Yeah, you just need the badge.
My little earbuds. I grabbed my big.
Yeah, you just need your little pilot license badge there just to kind of make it official.
Yeah.
So you are coming all the way from New York City, and I know I never asked you. You lived in Paris for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, I lived in Paris.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
All of 2014, I lived in Paris. It was a lifelong dream come true, finally, to live in Paris with my family.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm jealous. I want to at least make a summer there. But, it's one of those bucket list things I'm going to make happen one of these days. But you have definitely been involved in the online marketing space for ages. And what I love is, you and I in Facebook groups, and I know you and mine, and I'm in yours. And I just love the posts, especially the deep-seated thinking ones, like, the whys and the hows. And have you thought about what you're doing and what it means to everything? So let's dig right in with, we're talking about mastering impact and making an influence with people. So give us a little bit of a background story, you mentioned research. What exactly has that been about?
Okay, so yeah, I had a couple realizations. So the thing that threw me into this research, first of all, it was a selfish pursuit at first. I was sitting, so like you mentioned, I lived in Paris, and I was on a retreat, a personal retreat to Amsterdam, and I was sitting there in Amsterdam doing some thinking and journaling and eating the fun little Dutch pancakes that you can get there, and just kind of planning what I wanted to do moving forward in my work. I just hit my 10th anniversary of my current, or my other business, Internet Business Mastery, that you mentioned. And it's just kind of, for a number of reasons, a good time to reflect forward. And I was thinking, well, what would really engage my mind and get me excited? And I had a realization that after 10 years of doing business online, for the last 10 years, my primary pursuit for myself was, freedom. Like many of us, right? We want more freedom. We want to make more money so we can have more choices in life and just be able to do more cool stuff. And I've living in Paris was kind of the pinnacle of that lifestyle thing for me. And all of a sudden it hit me. It's like, what's far more important to me now is to reach a higher level of impact and influence. And so, I thought, well, what's the one thing I could do in the next few years that would really take things up a notch for myself in terms of opportunity and impact and reach? And turned the page in my journal and write a bestseller. And that excited me to have that challenge. That's something I'd always wanted to do. I mean, I've written a book before and sold a few thousand copies, but not a bestseller. And so that immediately got me excited. But then I had to decide, well, what's it going to be about? And I realized something that had fascinated me for, even though I'd been teaching internet business for many years, what was fascinating to me is that many of my students were able to become go-to leaders in these little pockets of these little markets where there were, urgent pains and problems, and they were stepping up and sharing their stories and doing research and teaching other people in a way that was, they were, after a year or two, outpacing or at least meeting, the usual experts that you would expect to be leaders in these topics and niches. So it was very exciting to me. It's like, what, things have really changed in the last 10, 15 years when it comes to our ability to become an influencer and have an impact in the world. And I could sense that in myself. My desire for lifestyle and freedom was now almost eclipsed. Not eclipsed, but was now being passed up on my desire to have a bigger impact and influence in the world. And so I was like, well, in the same way I want to do that myself, I want to help others do that by taking everything that I've learned in the last 10 years and continuing going deeper into that research of how do these master influencers accomplish the things that they accomplish, these huge reaches, reaching a lot of people using the internet and internet media. How do they get these big, we all have those leaders that we look at in our market and go, I want the opportunities that they have. That's so cool. I would even love to collaborate with them or rub shoulders with them. I want big companies to invite me to come and speak. Maybe that's going to speak at Google, or maybe that's going to speak at whatever, or like do a TED talk. How we all have these lofty impact goals, right? Well, how do we make that happen? And that's what I want to do with my research, especially because I don't believe that there's a one size fits all prescriptive path to making that happen. We all have a different voice and style and approach, or different values that we're bringing to the game. So what we really need is we need a framework that codifies the common elements that we see amongst all these different master influencers, but then allows us to take those and apply them to ourselves in a way that's true to our message and our own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my goal with what I'm.
So kind of like a framework, right? So in other words, if there was like a blueprint to how they became influential in their own way, you were kind of breaking down the process so to see if it's duplicatable, if we can actually do
absolutely.
that.
And I think there's this big myth, and I don't know where it comes from. There's some truth in it, like many truths, though it gets misunderstood, that it's like, well, if you want to do something, just find somebody else who's done it and do exactly what they did. And to a degree that's true, but often there's pieces of what they did that don't match up with us, whether it's just because of timing and luck, or maybe because that's not our strengths. And so I kind of liken it to the book Think and Grow Rich, where Napoleon Hill went out and he interviewed all these successful and wealthy people, and then came back and said, here's what I noticed about how they all think and behave and approach their success. And that's what I want to do with influence impact, specifically internet influencers at the top of their game, world-class influencers, come back and say, here's what they all do in common, so that now you can take whatever's true and authentic and your strengths and apply on top of it this framework of the commonalities and go and make your own big impact in the world, whatever that means for you.
Right, definitely. So, because I think that's the thing a lot of us struggle with is when we know we have these big dreams and we want to achieve something, but we're so worried about what everybody else is doing. We think it's the old way of either A, build it and they will come, which it's not the truth anymore. And second of all, if I just duplicate what so-and-so did, then I should have the same thing. But as you said, right, we're all different. We have a different vision. We have a different impact. We have a different mindsets. So, yeah, I know, and I'm sure we could dig right deeper in that. But one thing I do have to mention, I'm going to ask another question and I'm going to bolt outside. I have two puppy dogs who are screaming at me. Isn't this fabulous? The joys of live TV. I'm going to throw them out the door and be right back. So I'm going to ask this question.
Okay.
So let's break it down. And I know in your Facebook group, you mentioned about you were testing Periscope, right? And why you and give our audience a little bit of an example of what you did and the mindset and the theory behind testing it and why you had what the results you had with that.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So as I was starting into creating this new brand, in some ways I was starting back at scratch, right? And I was having to decide, how was I going to build my new platform? How was I going to attract an audience around this message that I wanted? Because if I'm going to have a best-selling book, I need some people following that message, and I need some people who believe in that message and are ready and wanting to consume it. And so I needed to decide, well, what channels am I going to use? Which of these internet tools am I going to use to build this new platform? And while it would have been very easy to just, and often we look into our past and go, well, what's worked for me before? And I'll just do that again. And while there is wisdom in that, I also am a big believer in staying curious and innovative and trying to push some things forward and try things differently. And even though I've grown successful brands in the past, a lot has changed since I launched those things. And so obviously I was looking at what are some stuff that's working right now? And I know that I'm also very fueled by novelty and trying new things out, right? And so Periscope was a natural thing. Periscope was a new thing, but I wasn't trying it just because it was new, right? There's a lot of new things that come and go.
Shiny objects.
Right. And so I always, exactly. I want to keep that in check, right? And not just chase a shiny object. But when I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is a natural fit for me because I really liked the live aspect of it. I love speaking live. I've done quite a bit of speaking live over the years. And so it was kind of a way to do that through the internet, and I like that like just in the same way we're doing Blab right now. I like that live interaction, knowing that people are here. It ups the energy. We get their comments and questions that help shape the content. And so for me, it seemed like, a fun thing to try. So what I did is I decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and dive into Periscope for 2 or 3 months and experiment with it and see how it goes. And so that's exactly what I did. And there are a lot of things that went really well. And then there were some things that after evaluation, it didn't seem, at least the way that I was doing it, didn't seem like the right fit for the brand that I was making. And so for me, here's what went well with Periscope. It absolutely gave me that live interaction that I crave and enjoy. It absolutely was, one thing that we've been talking about in my Facebook group lately is the need for rapid, frequent feedback loops with our audience, right? So where you get to lob things out there and immediately get that sense of, did that resonate? Or is that something that they're interested in? Or is there more there that we should dig into? And Periscope allows you to do that. They're live, and you're throwing stuff out, and immediately the comments and the hearts and the shares are coming in. And so at the end of every single Periscope session, I would have this insight into, here's what worked really well there. And like the book I could see the book taking shape in my mind thanks to this feedback loop. And so there's this immediate sense of just some confidence and clarity in the message I wanted to share because of that live feedback that was coming through Periscope. So that was incredible. The things that weren't going as much as I'd hoped were that, I was hoping that it would bring new people to my message. And while people were finding me on Periscope and following me on Periscope, I don't know that it was doing a really great job at then bringing them back regularly, because we need to not only just get the attention of our audience and have them kind of buy in and opt in or follow and subscribe. We need to be able to engage them regularly over time, because that's where the relationship and the trust is built up, such that then we can have the impact that we want to have, or even make the income that we want to have. And so the problem with Periscope is that, at least in the way I was using it, and this is not a judgment across the board about Periscope, but in the way I was using it, is that I would do these long form, like 40, 45 minute presentations. I'd have like 5 bullet points of things I wanted to talk about, and people would get a lot out of it. People loved it, but that was a lot for people to consume. So a lot of people weren't able to carve that time out of their day to tune into a video, especially when I was doing 3 or 4 a week, right? Which I felt like I had to do them very frequently and consistently in order to grow the following through Periscope. So I feel like my following, my audience, this is an arbitrary number, but let's say, it was like 10% of them were able to regularly tune in and engage with my Periscope content, where that needs to be more like 30 to 50% of your audience are regularly tuning in and consuming the content. So I decided, this is where speaking of feedback loops, I went to my Facebook group and I said, what is your ideal way of consuming this information I've been putting out? A lot of you have been tuning into Periscope saying you love it, but I also know there's a lot of you who aren't able to carve out that time to tune in live or even watch the replays. By far, and again, this is just for me and my message and my audience, by far the answer was audio podcast, which made sense because that's what I've done for 10 years. And I know that a lot of people still follow me from that. So I'm just shifting gears over to.
Do you think now that is because, and this is an interesting concept for me, because, we have the likes of like the Blabs and the Periscopes of the world, and we think, everybody's going to be there. But what I'm really hearing you saying, and what I've seen that's very visible in the group is, you pretty much need to know who your audience is, and you need to cater for them. So your audience primarily knows you as a podcaster. So in other words, they like to listen. They're like busy, entrepreneurs who doing many things, and to nail down a certain time to sit and watch something live maybe doesn't suit them as well. And I noticed the thread as well, they like to watch the replay in their own time, which is great. So, would you say then, for someone who's trying to build impact, who maybe doesn't have a following, who's trying to, would you say test a few? Would you say maybe do one over 90 days? What would your advice be for you to kind of figure out where the traction is?
Yeah, so there's a few criteria to consider. Certainly, like you said, want to consider your audience and who they are, and what kind of format might work best for them. You consider your own strengths and what would excite you. I mean, I was interested personally in Periscope because I like that live interaction. And incidentally, I'm going to find other ways to bring that into my platform, just in a more scalable and efficient way. But yeah, I'm a big fan of going with what I used the word before, curiosity or even fascination. There's so many different options out there, and it's so easy to spread yourself thin, or to look at somebody else and what they're doing and going, well, I should do what they're doing. And that's not necessarily true. And so I'm a big fan of choosing one or maybe two channels that excite you, that feel like they're a good fit for your audience and message, at least based on your intuition, if you don't have the opportunity to actually ask them what they prefer, and then go for it for, 60, 90 days and see, just really try to master it and dive into like, okay, what are people doing with this medium? What works best? What can I maybe do to do some things a little bit differently, and just see how it goes, right? And then you can do an analysis like I did after and go, well, what worked well and what wasn't working well. And I'm losing a couple things by moving away from Periscope. I'm losing that live immediate interaction, and there was something else I was going to say too. But anyway, to bring that live interaction back into it, here's what I've decided to do. Today's Thursday, right? Yeah. Tomorrow, I'm recording the first episode of this audio podcast. And what I did is I set up through my webinar service a live broadcast where people can tune in and they can all comment there. And I'm still going to interact to their questions and their comments live on the episode. Now, that's something I feel comfortable doing because I've done lots of webinars in the past and I've podcasted for a long, long time. And so, showing up live and speaking extemporaneously live and just having my notes and interacting with the comments is something I'm comfortable doing. And that'll bring that live energy back into it. And I'll just record that one episode a week and have that be live. But then it goes out as an audio podcast that all those people who can't tune in live can then have an opportunity to consume in a way that's more efficient and effective for them. So I took that experiment and I shifted, but I'm like, okay, well, what can I grab from that I did like and that was working well and bring back over here to this other medium that I'm going to use. So that's, that's kind of the way I think through these things. And maybe that offers some insights for.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely having an idea of more or less what it is that you like you, I love to talk. I know there's lots of opportunities I have to do some guest writing, but for me, writing takes me 3 times longer than to actually speak to someone in a conversation. So even though I will taste that option, for me, it was again, I love the live interaction. This is a 2-way conversation. I don't know about you, but Periscope was great, but it did kind of feel like I was speaking to myself, the whole monologue. You have the comments, right? Here we have everybody who's watching now, you're welcome to add your comments on the right-hand side of the page. And if you've just recently joined us, make sure to click on the tell a little bird, because we would really love to have more people. I think we're a little early for the West Coasters. All our friends in California are still waking up, so it's fine. It's what's great. They'll still be able to get this really great content on replay. So again, we're tasting out what works. But so now you figured out, you mentioned about the podcast. Would you say now with Periscope, you said it wasn't directing people to your website, right, to take action? How do you feel using the new live format? Are you going to be more what's the end goal, really? If we think about it, building impact is great, but what is the actual end goal? And do you feel like this will help you get you closer there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, so maybe one thing I can do is I can share what I call the impact map, which I know you're familiar with because we've talked about in the Facebook group. And this is another framework that I use and have taught for many, many years. And I've noticed that this is really the case for influencers out there. And so what the impact map does is it gives you 5 steps that you need to move your ideal prospect through in order to reach that point of impact, that point where you are getting them to take action. Because if you think about it, really, as influencers, that's what we want people to do. We want them to take action. Action is what changes their behavior. It's what changes their mind. And that's where transformation happens in their lives. And then honestly, that's where we can make money too. Obviously, if we want people to buy, at some point, there's a call to action. So action's the entire key. So how do we get people to that point of action? Well, the very first thing, especially today, is we got to get their attention. And attention is fractured up so much. I mean, we have so many options to consume information. We have this overwhelm of information. How do you cut through that noise and get people's attention? And so what you need to be doing when you're thinking about what channels you're going to use or what your platform is going to look like is this something that is going to get the attention of my ideal audience, right? Now, an audio podcast, say on Periscope, I didn't feel like I was getting rapid enough attention of new people finding me. And maybe that's just because how I was using it. I think if I wanted to get more attention or build my audience faster on Periscope, I needed to be on there 4 or 5 times a day, and not necessarily 30 or 40 minutes at a time, maybe 10 or 15 minutes at a time. But that was not my style to do that. And so I wasn't going to be able to use Periscope in an effective way to get attention. Whereas a podcast, I can put it into iTunes. I can even have it transcribed and put it on my blog. It's going to be posted on my blog as well with show notes, right? And so now that's giving some really good touch points for people to find and people are more likely to pass around or like refer people to a blog post, at least right now, than they are like, oh, you got to go check out this Periscope, right? So for attention, that's what's going to work better for me. The next step after attention is you have to have a way for them to give you permission or basically raise their hand and opt in and say, yeah, okay, I'm resonating with you. I would like more of this. Let's, I'm going to stick around. So here's my email, or here's my follow on my subscription on Blab, or here's my follow on Facebook, or whatever that might be. On, whatever, every channel has like its form of subscription or opt-in, right? And with Periscope, that wasn't happening fast enough for me. And I think that's just because I wasn't doing it often enough throughout the day. So you have the attention and the permission and then engagement. And this is really where Periscope, at least for me, broke down, is that frequent, consistent interaction that happens because we need to deepen the emotional and the mental and the personal investment that they have in your brand. And that happens by showing up like this and giving value and empathizing with them and sharing stories and ideas that make them go, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed, or that's me that you're talking about, right? And so that bond starts to form, which brings us to the next step, which is relationship and trust, which is you're making, are you sharing content and information that's resonating in a way that's making these deposits in the relationship and trust account? And once you've done enough of those deposits, now you can come around with the call to action, which is the 5th step, and say, hey, go do this thing, go opt in for this thing, go buy this thing, go change this thing in your life, go try this exercise I just talked about. So you got to ask yourself, with the channels that I'm using, is it allowing me, like if it's one channel or 2 channels or whatever you're trying to use, am I hitting all 5 pieces of this impact map? Is it allowing me to get the attention of my ideal audience? Is it allowing me to have them opt in and follow me? Is it allowing me to engage with them regularly? A large percentage of them coming back frequently to consume. Is it allowing me to put out content that's building a relationship of trust? And then is it effective for getting the call to action in the end? And not that every channel, like Blab might be good at, 2 or 3 of those, right? And then maybe from Blab, you get them on an email list, and that allows you to hit the other couple ones that are maybe not as strong on Blab. I'm just saying that arbitrarily as an example, right? But now between like my Facebook group and the podcast, I feel like I'm going to be able to hit all 5 points on the impact map really, really well. And, and get the response I need in order to have the impact that I want to have in the end.
Right. So it's very much about thinking about the strategy, right? Because I love strategies. Like I've realized I could spend all my days, I could spend all day on Blab joining in conversations, but unless it has an effective way of, and that's why I also feel like you, I sort of not gave up on Periscope, but I sort of backed off a bit because like you, it's almost like Twitter. If you're not tweeting 10 to 20 times a day, it's hard to really be visible. And that's what I think I hear you saying as well, is that you kind of need to pick a few, like test a few, but then focus on 1 or 2, because we can't be that effective if we are spread so thin. And I think that's what a lot of us online entrepreneurs are suffering from, is like, where do I put my attention, right?
Yes.
And the one thing I wanted to mention, I know
a rule of thumb is don't do more than 2 until you have a team.
Okay.
Try to do more than 2 before you have a team, you are going to burn yourself out.
Yeah, and it's like big fizzle and then crash, and then no one hears from you again. So that's why in some ways I feel a little guilty not, servicing Periscope, but I like you, I tested it, and I'm just finding it's just not where my peeps are. So for me, again, it's like finding what works for you, but you only know by testing it. So the other part, I know we've mentioned Periscope, but I know what you do really, really well is the Facebook groups. Now tell us why you love this and why this has been your focus of late.
Yeah, so the Facebook group thing was kind of a new idea for me. I mean, again, going back to, okay, I need to launch my platform. What channels am I going to use? And all these shoulds were going through my mind. Well, it should be the blog. you know, because all these people that like people that I looked up to, they're all blogging. They're very prolific writers. But like you, I think I'm a good writer, but the process of writing
it's
it
painful.
takes a lot of energy for me, right? It's a lot easier for me to show up, turn on the camera, turn on the mic, and talk. And so, you know, I was like resisting the whole blogging thing. You know, it should be an email list because, well, that, you know, we all know how, and you know, I'll have an email list eventually, but I just like, again, I went back to that question of what would be really fun and exciting and motivating for me to test out with my brand. And the Facebook group thing I've done for a number of years, but it was always just for paid students. So people would join our course and they'd get access to this, you know, private mastermind for our students. And that's worked great, right? It adds value, but I'm like, I see some people who are using these Facebook groups for free and really growing large audiences with them. And I knew that. So as I looked at it, I thought, well, you know, Facebook group, there is that potential. I mean, there's so many advantages to it, but I knew that if I could get some critical mass quickly with a Facebook group, well, that's the first thing. I felt like with the Facebook group, I could get critical mass faster, right? Like how often do we launch a blog and there's crickets? There's no one there yet, right? Because Facebook groups are inside of Facebook, the ecosystem of Facebook, there's all these factors working in our favor, all the social factors and the fact that people have a Facebook habit, really, like they're coming back multiple times a day. And so they just,
and my inbox is full with Facebook messages. I'm like, I can't keep up. I'm missing out on all the important bits because like 100 of them in like a couple of hours. I'm like, I can't answer them all.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's a whole other topic for sure.
Exactly.
But like, and thankfully, like it turned out that way. Like starting the Facebook group, it started growing very, very quickly. And I found that it brought me confidence and clarity very quickly because the feedback loop again was so rapid. People were showing up. I was able to post daily, even sometimes multiple times a day, different pieces of content, different questions, different interactions. You immediately see people start engaging with that. That boosts your confidence and gives confidence. It gives you insight and clarity about what it is your audience wants to hear. And not only that, but now, I mean, at first there is a lot of pressure on me to provide a lot of the value when a Facebook group is brand new and everyone's just kind of trying to feel it out and the culture hasn't established quite yet. But after a couple months, now people are coming in and sharing just amazing stuff, right? So now the pressure is not 100% on me to create all the value and content. Other people in the group are also doing that. And so there's this wonderful, I mean, going back to that third step in the map, the engagement map, the engagement is just off the charts. It's fast, it's frequent. I mean, I can't email people 3 or 4 times a day, but I can post in my Facebook group 3 or 4 times a day and people are going to see at least one, if not maybe even all of those. Right. So it's really, really powerful. And I'm just thrilled with how that's gone. Now, so
if you're saying you're not necessarily building an email list through the group, it's literally you can, and I put a link for those who are watching live. You can join Jason's group here. It's Influencer Impact in the Facebook groups, and it's free to join, right?
Yeah, it's free to join. You just request to join there. So let's go back to the impact map really quickly. This will help people demonstrate again. This will demonstrate again for people how to use that framework. You know, step number 1, attention. Facebook group works wonderfully for that because they see their friend, you know, Facebook it's a whole social ecosystem, right? So sometimes Facebook will tell people, look, your friend is posting over here. And so people see that, or it's really easy for people to share and go, hey, come and join this group. Like I've never had somebody, at least that I know of, like tell somebody or like add their friend's email to my email list, right? Or like say
that can be considered spam, but you know,
but like that happens on Facebook groups. So like the attention is really, really good. When it comes to permission, I do make the group private, meaning that they have to request to join, but anybody can request to join. And then I just very quickly have to approve. And that helps me keep spam out, but it also has that mental thing of I'm giving permission to be a part of this group. And I'm making that, you know, so there's a little bit.
And making them, it's basically the raising the hand, right? I really want to be part of this. Because I'm sure if you find the same thing, I have people on a regular basis adding me to groups. And I'm like, that's not cricket because you haven't asked my permission. It's like spamming me. And maybe I don't want to be interested in that kind of thing. So again, it's like it has its own etiquette, right? It's okay to invite people, but simply adding you, because then people won't really feel like they really want to be there. It's like, what are we doing here again?
Right. All of a sudden they're there and they're like, what's going on? Yeah, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. So yeah, there's
So
that permission bit. Engagement is just
engagement,
huge,
yeah.
huge, huge, right? Because people are, I mean, it's very mobile friendly. People are on their phones all the time. And so the engagement is easy for them to interact, whether it's on their computer or on their phone.
Yeah.
There's engagement with each other, not just with me. So engagement is huge. I'm able to put content out multiple times a day and give people an opportunity to engage with it and with me. I would say the relationship and trust is really big, because in Facebook, we're kind of there with the mindset of connection, right? We're there to connect with others and feel that belonging and that recognition and validation. And so all of that is built into that channel. And so I would say when it comes to the relationship of trust, it's very, very strong through Facebook groups. The piece that still remains to be seen is how effective is it at the call to action, at the last piece, the action piece. And that's where eventually, I mean, email is still one of the best things for getting people to take action. I haven't been too worried about it right now. I've just been focusing on building the group, though I fully intend on building my email list off of the Facebook group, and I have some ideas about how to do that. The one way that I have started testing is, like I said, tomorrow I'm doing the live broadcast of my first episode of my show. And so I asked people, hey, if you want to attend the live broadcast, go and enter your email over here. And then that'll give you the link to attend live. And then after we attend live, they're going to get an email just saying, hey, you signed up for this live broadcast. If you'd like to continue to get, email notifications of other live broadcasts and content and things other than the Facebook group, click here, and that'll essentially be their opt-in for my email list. And my email list will start building off of that. So I'm confident that I'll be able to build an email list off of the group. Will I be able to sell directly from the group? Well, I think so. I haven't yet, but I know people who definitely have, and in a very non-salesy way. I mean, there's a whole etiquette, like you said, to it, but I've got a friend who has a group about 1,500 people in it. He doesn't have a website. He doesn't have an email list. Well, he does, but he doesn't really use them. And he's making $500,000.
Oh, I need to figure that out, darling. You'd have to share that info. Wouldn't we all love to know?
It blew me away when he told me that. Almost half.
What's he selling though? Okay, so let's back it up a bit, because I know a lot of us are like, say what? Okay, so no email list, which goes against all the online marketing we've ever been taught. But what is he selling that he can make that much money? Because first of all, we have to make it noted that it's not necessarily about the numbers, because I know you now know several people who have almost 20,000 followers in Facebook groups, but unless it's the right bums on seats, in other words, the right people who are engaged, I don't necessarily, because I think that's what I'm finding with Facebook groups. It's not a popularity contest. It's not about how many people you can get. It's how many people, like you said, actually engage with you, right? So what would you think, taking us back to this guy who's doing $500,000, what is he selling that's getting people to take action?
Well, it's the same kind of stuff. It's information products and live. Like, he particularly likes doing the live webinars. So here's the main thing. Because the Facebook group gives you that immediate feedback loop, he's just continually paying attention to what's popping up all the time. And then he'll even come and go, I'm noticing that a lot of people are asking about this. So I'm thinking about doing a live training on that. Are you interested? Yes. So now he's got that feedback. Plus he's kind of primed the pump for people to think about, yeah, I want that from you. And then he'll come out and say, okay, live training this month on such and such topic. For those of you who are in the group, if you sign up to attend live right now, here's the price. It's $100, and you'll get the recording of that. After the live, the recording is going to be twice that price, right? So the best thing you can do is sign up right now. And he's got a number of these trainings, and then he brings the recording back and sells them. And every time that comes up inside of the group, like he'll say, it's an opportunity for him to like, oh, by the way, I did a training about this last year. Here's where you can grab that if you want. Right.
Okay.
And, and he does it in a very just natural way to bring this stuff up. So he has live trainings. And then he's got some little extra, or sometimes he'll put together what he calls micro memberships, where he's like, hey, you know what? I'm really curious about this thing over here. I'm thinking about doing some research and stuff into that. Does that interest you? Yes. Okay. How about we do $10 a month in order to get access to this information that I'm going to pull together and put into a usable form for you? Boom, 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 boom. People start signing up for that. So he just has multiple of these streams, but it's just information products based on what he's seeing his audience expressing an interest in, right?
So it's not necessarily saying, here's my product, come and buy it, and then there's crickets. He's actually doing what I know, in Ryan's group is ask your audience what they want, and then give them what they want. So in other words, instead of creating something that maybe doesn't resonate. So what you're saying is we really need to ask them first, get their feedback and get them to raise their hand, which is saying the yes in the posts, and then creating the product, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And here's, what's amazing about this is personally, I think he could be making twice that money, which might blow you away to think he's already making $500,000. And the reason why is because, I said he doesn't have an email list. He does have an email list of all of his purchased customers, but he's also, self-described a little bit lazy too, right?
I just make 500,000 being lazy, but whatever.
It's not my style to go and write emails every week the Facebook group's so much easier for me. I know that if he set up autoresponders and if he set up, the usual website pages and used his blog more, and he knows this too, that his income would go way up, but he's just like, this is what fits me and my lifestyle, what I want to do and the way I want to have an impact. And so he found a channel that works for him now. And he knows this as well. The big danger there is Facebook essentially owns and controls his audience at the end of the day, right? Thankfully for him, he has enough of a name brand that I think if tomorrow, for some reason, groups shut down or went away, a lot of people would come and find him on his site and he would start another channel up somewhere else, right? But, so you do have to, that is a piece of the puzzle you have to consider. But the point I want to make there is you figure out what works for you and what works for your audience. And it doesn't have to look like anything particular. Again, we look at the people that we admire and we're going, oh, well, they're doing a daily podcast, so I guess I better do a daily podcast. Or they're doing 5 periscopes a day, so I guess I better do 5 periscopes a day. And that's not necessarily true, because that may not fit you. It may not fit your audience. It may not be sustainable for your strengths.
Right. So here's a question I suppose we should have asked in the beginning. What if you don't know who your audience is? We talk about servicing our audience, because if you ask the right people what it is they want and you provide exactly what they want, it's almost like, well, duh, of course you're going to make sales. So what would you advise if somebody's trying to find their right audience, trying to get the right fit? Like, are these the right people I'm speaking to? What would you say about that?
So the process of defining your audience is a little bit of an iterative process, meaning you look inward and you go, okay, you make a few decisions and insights, and I'll explain that process here in a minute. And you go, okay, I got a good idea of what I think my audience is, or at least what I want my audience to be. And then it becomes an outward process of going out into the world and seeing, okay, where is that audience? What do they need? Are they actively looking for solutions to their problems? Can I connect with them in a way that feels good for both of us? Maybe coming back and going, okay, things I can adjust. I mean, and some of that is like with the impact map and the channels and experimentation we've been talking about. But here's where it all starts. It starts by looking at yourself and going, essentially, you're trying to find what your strengths are, where you can make the biggest contribution and impact in the world in a way that's fulfilling to you, and have the world pay you for the value that you very naturally want to bring to the world. And this is a process in internet business mastery that my business partner and I call the single motivating purpose, which I know you and I, Mimika, talked about giving away access to somebody to basically a case study and information about how to come up with this single motivating purpose, right?
Yes, and that's a good segue into the fact that if you're watching live, this is what makes it really great that you are live and showing up today, is because one lucky viewer will be able to win this giveaway that Jason has kindly donated. And you said it's like an exercise. You said it's a
process,
a course?
So it's a framework, really.
It's a framework, okay.
Identify, and what it is it's this whole process, and by the end of that process, you have a statement of what it is that you do best in the world and where you can make your biggest impact based on having gone through this process and had all this self-discovery, and also checking in with the outward world as well as to what the world values from you. And then you have this statement that basically acts as a filter or a compass to point you in the right direction towards an audience that will work well for you.
Right. So Stephanie, and that's what you said, it's iterative. It's not necessarily something you wake up one morning and go, oh, ta-da, light bulb moment, right? It's something you kind of tweak. I kind of always think about it like bumper cars, at the playground, where you're kind of trying a bit here and you're trying a bit there and you're tweaking and eventually you're sort of filtering to get to where you want to. But that is so true. If we don't really know what we're aiming for, we're pretty much going to get nothing.
Right. Well, you'll get nothing, or you'll burn out because your heart is not in it. You'll grind against you'll grind and grind and grind because you're focusing on things that are not your natural strengths. And here's another easy framework for people when it comes to identifying your audience. This is where it should all start. there's two options I think you have for an audience if you really
Mm-hmm.
want to if you really want to do something that's going to resonate with others and that's going to be fulfilling and exciting for you. You either decide to work with an audience that is a past version of yourself. So you're looking in your
Ah,
past and going, I used to be in this place. I went on this whole hero's journey. I traversed the wilderness and figured this out. I now want to help other people, guide them to this promised land that I found, right?
okay.
The past version of yourself. And for like Internet Business Mastery back in 2005, when we launched that podcast, that's exactly what we were doing. We're going, look, we used to be just like you. Back in 2003, we were in our jobs that we hated and we figured a way out of those jobs. And now we want to share with you the insights we've learned along the way. Or you target a present version of yourself. And this is where it's really exciting, is that it kind of opens up any possibilities. Like if you're going, I am so done with the things I've done in the past. I don't care that I've overcome those trials. I really have no desire to revisit them. That's fine. Present version of yourself. Here's a great example of this, and you'll appreciate this, Mimika. I bought 5 or 6 years ago. I bought a Canon DSLR camera, and I wanted to learn how to make short videos, but that looked really good, not only for business, but also just, because I enjoyed doing it, and family videos of I was going to be having a daughter and things like that. So problem was, I opened this camera and it was more complicated than anything I had ever used before, right? Lots of knobs and settings and stuff. So I go online to figure out, how do I use this to make the kind of videos that I want to make? And I did some searches. I immediately came across the site, a gentleman whose name I don't remember now, but he had the same camera as me. So I'm like, this is awesome. He was engaged in making professional commercials for big brands using this camera. And I'm like, that's awesome, right? The camera I got.
Was his name Casey Weinstead, the one who did Nike ads on a very small, little, I can't remember what it was.
No, but I love his stuff.
His stuff is awesome.
His stuff is awesome. No, it wasn't Casey's stuff, but yeah, I wish I could remember. I'm sure you would recognize his name. Anyway, at the end of the day, though, his content it didn't connect with me. It was overwhelming. It was above my head. I didn't have the goal of working for companies making commercials. So there was a mismatch in the voice, right? And like, okay, let's keep looking. The next site that I came across was a gentleman by the name of Dave Dugdale. And his site, I think he just recently switched, but his site at the time was learningdslrvideo.com. I think he just recently upgraded to just learningvideo.com. Can you believe that? He landed learningvideo.com.
I know, he must have bought that domain. I tell you, I've been trying with all different.
Now you know how well he might be doing with this, right? So, but the point being is, I got to Dave's site. The first video I watch is him opening up a box with the same camera as mine, or very, very similar camera, opening it up, looking at it going, holy cow, I have no idea how to use this thing. But I'm going to figure it out. So come along with me and I'll just share with you, good or bad, what I learned along the way, right? And
so he's taking the audience on the journey with him. Okay.
And so he'd go and do some experiments with light or some experiments with focus, or he'd get a new slider that let him get nice smooth shots of video. And he'd like, oh, that was a total flop. I ran into this problem and I didn't like that piece of equipment because of this, or here's what I screwed up with my light. I didn't realize that really what you need to do, and that was awesome. He was speaking my language. He was just like me. He was speaking to a present version of himself, or at very least somebody who's just a little bit, a couple steps behind, right? And this is something I realized recently that there's a name for. There's something. Have you ever heard of the term a bellwether sheep?
Yes, I have. It's a real British term.
Yeah, apparently, because I never heard of it before. A bellwether sheep. So we all know like a herd of, is that what they call them? A herd of sheep? A flock of sheep.
No, I think it's a herd, but whatever.
A group of sheep.
Okay, lots of sheep hanging out,
sheep hanging out.
Shooting the breeze.
Right. You often have like the shepherd, right? And the shepherd is like, the guy sits up on the hill and he's got his, his cane, and he calls the sheep, he takes care of the sheep and leads them. And that's one type of leader, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But then often there's something called a bellwether sheep, which is one of the sheep. And it's called a bellwether because he wears a bell. He or she wears a bell. And that sheep leads the flock by, going in, and they hear the bell and they follow that sheep. And that sheep is just walking. He's one of the flock, but he's just walking a couple steps ahead, right? And actually, the friend I mentioned well, an online friend. Friend is such an interesting term. Anyway, that had the $500,000 Facebook group. His name's Colin Terrio. He's the one that introduced me to that concept, the bellwether sheep. So that's kind of what you're being. You're like, look, I'm one of the flock. I'm one of you. I'm choosing to stand up, put this bell on, and walk a couple steps ahead. So let's follow, and I'll just share with you as the journey as I go along. And now that means, all you need to do is just pick something you're fascinated by, pick an audience that you can easily empathize with, which if you're excited about it and learning it and excited about the journey, naturally that's going to be infectious. And if you're somebody who desires to help others, then that's going to be a very easy audience and role for you to step into. And I think that's a powerful way to start a brand. So
Martin Hunchback says, is flock. I'm British, he says. Sorry. So thanks for clarifying. I'm like, I love how he's like, I'm British. I know. I'm British. I should know. I lived in England for 6 years. You think my mom and my sister are still there, but I know it's like, I have to remember, I'm in America right now, but we're speaking to people from all across the world. Okay, so we have to address this question. So E. Beyonde wanted to ask, he had a question earlier. He really wanted to know more about, and we talked about this other guy who you mentioned is making $500,000. He really wanted to know, Jason, what your earnings were. But I know in the follow-up was that you are starting again in terms of you've done the business, because I think it's what's hard is, you do a business, and as you said, you get to a stage where you outgrow something, or you've passion in the beginning, you become that bellwether sheep, but then you grow and you realize, okay, I'm done with this journey now. Now I want to start something new. So in terms of like where you at right now, give our audience a bit of an understanding of like, what is your focus now, and why is this important that you feel you're not doing what you did before and that you've moved on to something new?
Right. So, and let me make one distinguishing thing here. I still have my other business, Internet Business Mastery, and it's been going for 10 years. And thankfully, we reached a point, and this is one of the most valuable lessons. So there's two or three answers I want to give to that question. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned in the last 10 years is often the person to start something or come up with the idea or vision for something is not the person to grow it. Right. And we see that all the time with people like Steve Jobs and where you've got your visionary and then you've got like your engineer that keeps it going. And for far too long, my business partner and I tried to stay the engineer or the driver. We had the vision. We were the voice of the business. We're still the voice of the business. If you listen to Internet Business Mastery, in fact, a new episode came out yesterday. It's still us, the voice of that business. Thankfully, earlier in this year, because both of us just realized we had hit a plateau of where we were able to take the business based on our strengths and the systems that we had. We hired a woman to be a CEO for our business, and she now runs that business. We just show up to be the face of the business. And so now 10% of my time is maintaining that business. We are able to get to a point where the systems and the team maintain that. And I am able to shift gears and not lose that income, right? Which is very important. It's different from chasing a squirrel and leaving something to wither and die, because I've done that before, and knowing when it's time to hand over the reins
and like pivot,
right? And so one of the reasons for the pivot is it's time for someone else to grow that brand. Another reason is I've been doing it 10 years. I need a new challenge. I need something else. I still want to serve that audience, but thankfully now I've got all this time and energy to focus on something new. And it's a wonderful position to be in. I realize because I've got my income, which is excellent and gives me a great lifestyle from that other business. And now I'm able to just like experiment and try different things and not worry about immediate cash flow in this current business. And so I'm able to benefit people who follow me now from all my experience from the last 10 years, and also benefit them by, look, I'm in a position to be able to experiment and try things out because I don't have to worry about, am I tanking my primary income stream, right? So, so that's, I don't know if that kind of answers some of the question of like where I'm at and some of my motivations for the pivot and why I'm doing it.
Well, I mean, basically, I think from what he was trying to say is the credibility of what you're speaking from now is that, yes, you're not saying you're coming from nothing and you're giving advice. You've actually been there and done it. You still have an income. You're still making money from what you did before. And the whole lesson to be learned is that, you've built something, you've allowed it to grow, but now you've realized it's time to move on. It's like you have a child, right? Like I've got 2 teenagers. I have to soon consider that they're going to leave the home very soon. And I have to be confident in the skills that I've taught them that they'll be okay. But it's the same time as allowing yourself and saying, okay, listen, there's no point in me being in this if I'm not passionate about it anymore. Kind of like with the book you mentioned, and that's what I love about your group is you come up with a lot of interesting books where you interview Todd Henry for Louder Than Words. Great book. I definitely would advise you read it, where he talks about the different modes that you're in and like, when you're in the discovery and the learning. And like, I think you and I are in the crisis mode. We've been doing what we've done 10 years, and now you kind of get a little stale, right? You want a new challenge, especially if you are wanting to make that impact. So it's not to say that it's a failure. You get to a stage where things have to move on, and it's great. And that's what I find is totally awesome with what you're doing. You're still being able to maintain your baby, and it's grown up, and yet now you can, have another baby and start to grow that business. So I think that's super cool. But before we get into the next point, I do want to mention to those who are listening, your chance to be able to win Jason's giveaway. You need to answer this question. So this is why it pays to pay attention. He called his strategy something, a impact what? Like there was 5 stages we went over. It's a 3-letter word. It's like so obvious, darling. Like, we're going to make it so easy for you to remember. He refers to this a lot when he teaches, and he mentioned it, like we had the first one was attention, and then engagement, and then what was the other ones? There was 5 stages to your impact, ... If the first person who can give me that word, ... Yeah, like it's a framework, a blueprint. Because it's almost like you need a trademark. The name of it. Yes, congrats, Martin. Boom, you won it. An impact map. And Jason is really good at that. So woohoo, congrats, you won. So how would you like Martin to get in touch with you, Jason?
He can email me at jason@jasonvanorden.com. I'll type that in here right now.
Perfect. Well, congrats. And I know he did say he was really keen to win that. So yay, we like to make people happy here today. And that's why it pays to pay attention and be on live. You get to grab some great goodies just by being part of the conversation. So all the way from good old Blighty, he gets to pick that out. So that is awesome. And I tell you, we're already on almost at an hour, but I know you and I could talk about this all day. There's like so many aspects to this that we could go into. But we've mentioned, for those who are new to the conversation, we talked about Periscope. And if you didn't get the beginning, I definitely would advise you watch the replay, because Jason talked about it, his Periscope experiment, especially relating to engagement. And then we've covered things like Facebook groups, and as well as, how do you decide on your audience in a little bit of a backwards way. But yeah, we've definitely covered a lot of content, which I think is great, especially if you are wanting to build your own impact and your influence. So I'd have to say, so what is the best way would you think people can get in touch with you? How would you like people to find you? The Facebook group? I
would love them to join the Facebook group if any of this speaks to them. And so you had the link up there.
Yes, let me copy it. It's facebook.com/groups/
Here we go. It's joinimpact.net.
There we go.
That will forward people over. Joinimpact.net.
And as I said,
people are just walking along listening to this later. They can
so that's .net, not .com. So just so you know, in case you're listening to the audio later, and that's a great way to create that engagement and to be amongst other like-minded people who are on the same path as you to developing that impact. So you can make and show up to the world and really deliver what it is, the talents that you've got, and serve those people. So I'm really excited about everything we covered. And I know, as I said, we'd have to have you come on again because we've covered so much content. I've got to go back myself and listen to the notes. And like, there's so many questions. I'm sure a lot of us would, especially once we have the people on the West Coast waking up to their morning coffee, were like, oh my gosh, I wanted to ask him this question. But so definitely, Jason's on Twitter and Facebook, and as I said, join the group. We're all there hanging out, daily conversations, really great stuff to help you get going. And if you would like more free resources that I only share with my newsletter community, go to my website, mimikacooney.com. I'm known as the video marketing expert. So we talked about video earlier, and I've actually got a free toolkit, which is really a downloads to help you be able to use video, things like Blab, how to prepare, and all the sort of behind the scenes things that I like to share with my audience, because and you'll be able to get more information that way. And of course, if you enjoyed today's show, please do click to subscribe to our channel and click to tell a little bird to share it with your friends. The more friends we have at the party, the more fun it's going to be. And make sure to subscribe to Jason's channel too. We are going to be hoping he gets to do more blabs. Yes. And I am going to definitely be paying attention for that. You said tomorrow, which is Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern time, is your webinar. What is the topic of your webinar?
So episode number 1. So this will be fun. You're going to be finding out why. Okay, so there's 3 concepts I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about combinatorial creativity, the human knowledge doubling curve, and the last mile. And all three of these concepts are incredibly important to anybody who wants to have an impact and influence in the world. And understanding these three concepts are going to greatly increase, both in your mind and for the world, the value that you have to offer, and hence the impact and income you're going to be able to make from that. So
that's going to be awesome training. It's going to be super great. So first step is go and join the group. Then scroll in the feed. You'll see he's got the list for how to join. And maybe you need to pin that post today so we can find it.
Okay.
And so you can register for that, and then you can get access to the podcast recording and be part of the conversation. So I'm going to say thanks to everyone who's joined us. Thanks. Congrats to Martin for joining us. And thanks. What is your first name, Ibiondo? Thank you very much for interacting with us today. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. And I know some people are scared to ask it, but I know we like to know, just from a credibility factor, that our audiences are vetoed. We know they've got great content. And I tell you, Jason's the man to follow if you really want to, take over the world and make a greater impact. So I'm going to say thanks to everyone for joining us here on Mimika TV. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have more shows that come up. I do this every week on a Thursday. We're going to be moving to noon as of next week. So make sure to diarize it, save the date, and we'll see you then. Until next time, take care. Bye.